Shalom, everyone. We'll talk today about Reshut Harabim and its definitions according to the Torah and according to the rabbis. So, the most pressing practical question when dealing with issues of hotza'ah, which means carrying or removing from one domain to the other, on Shabbat is whether streets and cities and towns are considered a Reshut Harabim or Carmelite. So, just to make it clear, even though the I-95 and I-75 might have more than 600,000 people traveling there every single day, that's not that those aren't roads in cities, and so it wouldn't even be practical to talk about them because you don't leave the city on Shabbat anyway, so you wouldn't be crossing one of those gigantic highways. So back to the streets of the city. If streets today are considered a Reshut Rabim, literally the domain of the public, then it is very difficult to do what is necessary to transform them into a Reshut Yachid, into a private domain. This transformation involves surrounding the entire city with a fence, installing doors in every entranceway, and ensuring that they are all closed at night. So in the old days when you had a walled city, the gates would be closed. And actually, maybe a fun fact from Jewish history, Nehemiah, the partner of Ezra, who came to the land of Israel, actually commanded people to not only close the gates at night, but also to close them on Friday late afternoon and only open them back either Saturday night or Sunday morning. That was in the streets of Jerusalem and the gates of Jerusalem. So, barring this, it would be prohibited to carry in our cities and towns. If you remember, we mentioned Ocean Parkway in New York. I'm not sure if there's other examples that are like that. So, in contrast, if streets today are defined as a Carmelite, i.e., only in quotation marks rabbinically, are they treated as a Reshut Rabim, as a public domain, then it is relatively easy to transform them into a Reshut Yachid, where carrying would be permitted through the Eruv. This transformation involves surrounding the city with a Tzurat Petach, a halachic doorway, by erecting poles and extending strings between them to form a sort of doorway between every pole. Some cities have a problem where if there's a bridge in the middle and the bridge is like a drawbridge, that causes problems, but most cities that only have these poles around them and the strings, what we call an eruv literally means mixing up or changing or interchanging. And so the idea is that we are mixing up the Reshut Yachid, the private domain and the public domain together. And so we are doing that through these doorways. Let us preface our discussion by recalling that the prohibitions of Shabbat are derived from the types of labor performed for the Mishkan. When the Torah commands us to refrain from melacha on Shabbat, it means refraining from Mishkan work, the tabernacle, in which the Jews were involved in the desert. If so, then the definition of Reshut Rabim should also be derived from the Israelites' desert existence, since the main thoroughfare in the Israelite camp was 16 amot wide, approximately 25 feet, right? Yeah, I think, yeah. In order to enable the passage of the two wagons that transported the different parts of the Mishkan, it follows that only a street equally wide is deemed a Reshut Rabim. However, Rishonim disagree whether in order to qualify an area as a Reshut Rabim, there's also a minimum requirement for the number of people who make use of the street during the week, obviously not on Shabbat. And so some maintain that any street or marketplace that is open to the public and is 16 amot wide is considered a Reshut Rabim, a public domain by Torah law. It makes no difference how many people pass through each day, even if it's just approximation or I'm forgetting my English. According to this opinion, the Eruvim that we construct nowadays, namely the type known as Tzurat Petach, the shape of a doorway, are ineffective because our cities have streets wider than 16 amot. Furthermore, according to this position, as long as the city has streets that are 16 amot wide, a Tzurat Petach is not effective for the small streets either. The existence of a Reshut Harabim within an area encompassed by Tzurat Petach invalidates it. This is the opinion of Rambam, Rabbeinu Tam, Ramban, Rashba, and many others. So, according to this, the idea is that if we made a Tzurat Petach, it wouldn't work, but we can make still, like they do in Flatbush, an eruv from one side of Ocean Parkway and an eruv on the other side, and it's just Ocean Parkway that you have to not be able to carry in. Others maintain that since the camp of the Israelites in the desert consisted of 600,000 men, all of whom needed to walk to the Mishkan in order to help build it during the week and to hear the Torah taught by our teacher Moshe, the Kohanim and the Leviim, the Levites, it follows that a Reshut Harabim is defined as a road or marketplace that is at least 16 amot wide and through which 600,000 people pass daily, which is also very interesting because in the Midbar, in the desert, we were 600,000 men, and so let's assume that all of them were married. That's 1.2 million, but for the requirements of Shabbat, according to this opinion, it's only 600,000 people. Doesn't matter if they're men or women or even children under the age of bar mitzvah. If fewer people traverse it daily, it is considered a Carmelite. This is the opinion of Bahag, Rashi, Smag, Rosh, and many others. So it's almost like a equal opinion for each one of these positions. Within this position, there is an additional debate. Some maintain that an area still qualifies as a Reshut Harabim, even if it is not used by 600,000 daily, but only frequently or even just occasionally. For in the desert, not all the men traveled on the path to the Mishkan every day. In practice, only in mega cities such as New York City and Mexico City are there streets traversed by 600,000 people every day. So I've never been to Mexico, but I believe that this is also true because one of the interesting laws in Mexico City is that because there's 20 million people living there approximately, each neighborhood has 2 days that they're not allowed to use their personal vehicles. And amazingly enough, the Jewish people in Mexico requested and were granted the permission that Shabbat, Saturday, is one of those 2 days. So there's a sticker on the back of your car telling you, telling the cops, sorry, which days are not allowed to be used. But even if you live in a different neighborhood where Saturday is not a day, if you are Jewish, they allowed that to be one of the 2 days, which I think is very, very open-minded and incredible. So, that's according to this opinion, most streets are not considered a Reshut Harabim, but rather a Carmelite. Therefore, carrying there on Shabbat can be permitted with an eruv of the Tzurat Petach type. According to this opinion, today the streets considered a Reshut Harabim by Torah law are mainly intercity highways, and since these roads are meant to serve everybody and their use is not limited to people of one city alone, they are considered Reshut Harabim, even if fewer than 600,000 people pass through each day. And like I said, you're not even supposed to get to the I-95 or the I-75 on Shabbat because there will be no purpose in crossing those highways on Shabbat for any specific need. So, as today is Friday, I wanted to share an amazing connection to the idea of Reshut Harabim. Rashi quotes Rabbi Akiva, who learned from what's called the Gzera Shava, comparison of words, that where it says in chapter 15 of Numbers, Vayu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar, that the Israelites were in a wilderness, and if you note the exact same dots, a petach under the bet, a chirik under the mem, a shva under the dot, and a kamatz under the bet, the second bet, is the same exact way that is quoted in our parsha about Tzlofchad, Avinu met b'midbar, our father died in the wilderness, since it's exactly not only the same word, the same 5 letters, but also exactly the same uh, vowels underneath it. Rabbi Akiva learns from that their father, Sofrad, was the Mekoshesh, the person who was gathering wood on Shabbat, and he died in that sin. We're not going to go into all kinds of discussions that are about that, just the idea that Bamidbar in the wilderness is where this Reshut Harabim was, where there was 600,000 men, and it was wider than 16 amot. In fact, the Talmud tells us that it was 12 Roman miles, which is just over a kilometer by 12 Roman miles. And so that was a Reshut Harabim, and so that's why in the desert, our ancestors were not allowed to even collect the manna on Shabbat, and that's why it didn't fall on Shabbat. It only fell on Friday, a double portion, so that they could have for Shabbat. They were allowed to go and visit somebody else in another tent, but they were not allowed to carry anything through the camp on Shabbat. It had to be part of the definition of what we consider clothing or jewelry, and so that is, I think, an incredible connection to this week's Torah portion, and we will stop here.